So we're a little late with this review, but in the interest of keeping up to date, we didn't want to skip the episode. That being said, we're diving straight into some juicy plot and watching it all unfold in arguably one of the best anime adaptations around. And that's pretty exciting to say the least. Now just letting you know in advance, like I do with every review, I have read the manga and I know the plot going forward, but I prefer to keep these reviews with only the information we've been given so far. I find it much more fun than jumping back and forth between the manga and the anime plot, and it allows anime onlys to watch as well. And with that little disclaimer out of the way, let's get straight into it. Before the episode begins, we get a summarized breakdown of the last scene from the previous episode, where Midoriya has a vision of the history between the original founder of One for All and the beginnings of All for One's tyranny. The scene gives a lot of in-depth detail that is important to Midoriya going forward, and it was a good refresher heading into the new episode. Straight after the explosion in his room, we get a hilarious and kind of touching scene of Ayama checking on Midoriya. Luckily enough for him though, Ayama's arguably one of the most naive and oblivious members of Class 1A, so he got off pretty scot-free. I think it's clear though that the vision had a serious impact on Midoriya, far more than the previous time that he saw the predecessors and caused his quirk to enact on its own. He goes to see All Might and discusses the vision he had, where it seems at least he tries to find some kind of comfort in the fact that All Might had discussed seeing the vestiges before. However, when Midoriya explains that One for All spoke to him directly, and his vague messages about passing the singularity point, it just leaves the two with more questions than answers. We also got spoiled with a new scene of young All Might with his mentor, and we got a lot of speculation from her about the reality of the One for All quirk and the vestiges within it. That as the quirk is passed on, it stores the personas of its users, which can then eventually interact with the current user and help shape them as a hero and a person. I'm really enjoying getting more history and lore about One for All and the previous users, and it's always fun getting a vision of what young All Might used to be like, so I really enjoyed this scene. Midoriya also expands on this point, on how the quirk he's received has passed through so many previous users that it's almost getting to the point where it can't be controlled anymore. With all this information, there's so many questions left unanswered, and despite All Might and Midoriya's positivity on working and figuring it out together, you can't help but feel that there's more at play here, and that this is going to lead into a new chapter of Midoriya's quirk and power. With the mood lifted, we see Midoriya and All Might talk about the upcoming training session where they bump into Izawa, and this was a pretty hilarious scene, where out of fear of their secret being discovered, All Might just throws Midoriya completely under the bus, making him out to be a super keen fan, and that he's unhappy about all the attention he gets. Izawa, of course, promptly shuts him down, which makes it all the more funny. He just destroys him. Their chemistry and time they spend together is always hilarious, and I love that Izawa can almost creep All Might out in how observant he is. The tension's swiftly broken by Midoriya, who comments on Shinso being with Izawa, and you almost get the feeling that Izawa was a bit annoyed by Midoriya unknowingly calling out Shinso and Izawa being spotted together, just like him and All Might. It's great that we finally get to see Shinso again, and the greeting between them at least seemed pretty amicable compared to what it was at the sports festival. We then join the rest of Class 1A at the training grounds where we get to see the adaptation that the students have made to their costumes now that the weather's cooler. It's such a small detail, but I really enjoy when the story pays attention to the little practical details that are easy to gloss over. It shows that the story is seriously well thought out and gives a little extra enjoyment of seeing these new adaptations to costumes, which are always pretty cool. Plus, we get a glorious set of moments, including Bakugo's rage against Deku, which we haven't seen in ages, Uraraka punching herself in the face due to her jealousy of Hatsume, and the arrival of Class 1B led by the hilariously arrogant Monoma. We then get a small briefing on the names and looks of every student in Class 1B to give us a brief idea on who they are before the class training begins. Obviously, we've seen quite a few of them during the sports festival and the joint summer camp, but we'll most likely dive into significant detail of their quirks when the joint battle begins. It's great that we get to see a new variation of costumes and heroes showing how diverse all the classes are at UA. We then see Monoma start to insult 1A until he's literally choked out by Izawa, with his teacher literally doing nothing to stop this. I know these are silly little anime cliches, but my god, it never stops being funny. It's just so ridiculous. The teachers then quickly introduce Shinso, who will be joining the training as he is attempting to transfer into the hero course. We see Shinso like before, but with added hero gear such as the capture bandages like Aizawa's and a black mask just below his face. Obviously, this ties into the scene where they were together before, and you could initially brush this off as just a one-off meeting before the hero training session, but this heavily alludes to Aizawa personally aiding him to better himself in order to transfer into the course. It's pretty wholesome considering Aizawa always gives off the impression that he doesn't really care, but in actuality he proves himself time and time again to be a considerate teacher and person that takes the lead in all sorts of situations. The reactions by the classes to Shinso joining the training are largely typical for each character, but the most hilarious and out of character moment was seeing Ojiro literally trembling in fear to see Shinso again. But I guess this is pretty understandable considering what happened to him last time they spoke. They quickly rehash his brainwashing quirk, and when Mineta brings up the fact that Deku managed to somehow break out of the hole, Deku has to laugh it off quickly and excuse it as a fluke. Which technically it was, but I'm glad they got that explanation out of the way and didn't make all the other students look stupid by not remembering. Shinso then addresses the class with a pretty determined but also pretty cold tone. It's made very clear that he's at a disadvantage when trying to become a hero, with preconceived ideas about the use of his quirk and the way the entrance exam was set up. So it's great to see that the show and the story shine a light on all the different sorts of pathways that students can use to become heroes, and that it's not a perfect world. Despite Shinso being set on joining the hero course, whenever someone says they're not here to make friends, generally speaking that seems arrogant and rude. But funnily enough, both Class 1A and Class 1B seem unfazed to say the least, and just admire his determination, rather than taking it personally. It bodes well to see that he's determined just like the rest of the hero students. And it's pretty clear that he'd fit in well in the hero course. The rules are established for the combat training where it will be a 4-a-side battle of students from Class 1A versus Class 1B. And to include Shinso, he'll play as an extra team member on one team for each class. The aim is to capture 4 members from the opposing team, with each team acting as heroes and viewing the others as villains. The given time limit is 20 minutes, and if not all team members have been captured within this time, the team with the highest number of members still in the battle is declared the winner. Fairly straightforward stuff. But then we had a hilarious moment where Ida had an internal crisis as he loves to commit to the role of either hero or villain, and that was a good touch as well. The teams are broken up and we get a montage of all the teams and who they're going to be fighting, with Shinso being added to the first team for Class 1A and the last team of Class 1B, which is of course pitted against Midoriya. And this should be a pretty epic showdown to say the least. All Might and Midnight arrive to watch the training where All Might dives into the strengths and weaknesses of both Class 1A and Class 1B in an attempt to decide who's going to win overall. Despite 1A having more experience with villains and battles, 1B has had the time and luxury to hone in and focus on improving, which means that they're probably at a higher standard personally. But 1A just has that big fight experience. They've had to fight through serious times and therefore know how to find resolve in those tough situations. It's left pretty open-ended and obviously it's going to be pretty close, especially with a wildcard like Shinso added to the mix. The first battle begins with 1A's first team, Asui, Kirishima, Kaminari, Koda and Shinso, attempting to come up with a plan to attack 1B. They try to cover some ground in understanding Shinso's quirk, but they lose time as they're promptly attacked by 1B, who use their knowledge of 1A to their advantage. It's pretty hilarious that despite all their relevant training and actually doing things by the book, just like with the initial training exercise in the first episode, they still managed to get it wrong. It also shows that despite 1B having less experience in combat than the others, they managed to think carefully and strategically and pull off a great initial attack. But obviously, the best part of this sequence goes without saying. Shinso's new ability to mimic anyone's voice with his new mask, and this results in brainwashing a victim. It's such an added advantage to a very dangerous quirk. It really makes his quirk viable again, because once people know not to respond to him, they won't. And it was a really great cliffhanger to leave off the end of the episode. Once again, My Hero delivered a stellar episode and is building into some seriously awesome battles that I really can't wait to see. But once again, that's just my opinion, and I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the latest episode? Like it? Hate it? Make sure to leave a comment and let me know.